Hey guys, so yesterday I found out about a bubble that happened in this country within the last 100 years that I had no idea about. I found what I could and started reading some modern sources and some really excellent old ones from the time. One in particular really got me thinking, are all bubbles basically the same thing? Let's investigate. Look at this. It's the stock price of Brunswick Corporation. It still exists today. If you own a boat, there's a good chance they have something to do with that. They used to own the company that makes arc trainers, those exercise machines. They had a billiards division, but they got rid of that. They don't do bowling anymore either, but, anyways, that's now. Let's zoom out. The year is 1952. It's the post war era. America's middle class is booming. People have more time and money than ever before, and they're looking for something to do. A company called American Machine Foundry, or AMF, of Brooklyn, New York, begins marketing automatic pin setter machines, and they are a game changer for the bowling industry. Bowling, in some form or another, has been around for a long time. It's featured in Rip Van Winkle, which was written in the 1800s, where Rip sees ghosts playing some version of bowling, which were from the 1600s. And there's depictions way older than that showing the game in ancient Egypt, so thousands of years. But until that moment, it still had some big problems. It was slow because every bowl, a worker called a pin boy, had to set up the pins before the next person could go. And it was frustrating because those pin boys might place the pins not really where they should have been. And it was kind of a lowbrow activity because the pin boys themselves were often sort of street kids who were just there making minimum wage. AMF had orders for over 10,000 units before they had anything more than just a demonstration model. Bowling suddenly changed. The number of people bowling, the type of people bowling, and how often. Bowling was TV friendly too, so it got popular at almost the exact right time. Bowlers were becoming celebrities, and just important, celebrities were becoming bowlers. It's kind of a key feature of a lot of bubbles. Remember how Tom Brady was telling you to buy crypto? So, as to the numbers, from 1946 to 1956, the number of Americans participating in bowling increased from 12.5 million to 20 million. To absorb those people, corporations and entrepreneurs started building. There were 6,600 bowling centers in 1955, and there were 11,000 less than 10 years later, so almost double. At this point, Brunswick Corporation stock is flying because why wouldn't it be? Shares are up more than 16 times in 4 years. Are they too hot? Not according to Brunswick President B.E. Bessinger. We've got his argument from a 1960 trade journal. And listen to this pitch and ask yourself if it's kind of something you've heard before. All you need to do is replace a couple of words and you have almost a modern pitch deck for a startup or a IPO. Investing is about fundamentals, but it's also about pattern recognition. If you hear someone talking about their total addressable market, it's probably already over. So here we go. Bessinger starts by going back to 1920, where there is approximately 1 million bowlers in the country. Moving to present, in 1960, he estimated that there were now 26.5 million. So far, so good, but then he says that this represents explosive growth averaging, quote, 63% a year over the past 4 decades. Wait, 1 million bowlers compounding at 63% for 40 years is 307 trillion bowlers, I think. Either way, it's way too many bowlers. He goes on to comment about that future, like I said, where it's harder to dispute as concretely. He thinks that growth of the sport is bound to continue thanks to big societal tailwinds. In the post-World War II era, the standard work week is shortening the amount of time that people have to be at an office or at a factory, and rising wages are creating a big middle class that has money to spend during that leisure time. Additionally, there's more room for bowling. Bessinger says that the availability and relative cheapness of suburban land is one of the major things driving the construction of these bowling centers, and notes that 50% of all suburban shopping centers now contain bowling centers. He didn't use the phrase, maybe it wasn't used as much back then, but he's talking about a paradigm shift, is what you might hear someone say today. But that paradigm shift is already in the rearview mirror. The problem is he thinks he's at the early adopter phase when he's really at peak growth. This is WeWork and Adam Neumann thinking that we would basically have unlimited demand, even though anyone who wanted to use that stuff was already using it. Now, sports in general at that time are seeing a big boost. He produces a chart of sports participation numbers from 1946 to 1956 right here with projections for 66. I don't know if he produced this chart, but at the very least it was supplied by him, and it fits with a quote I found from him from a profile that was done with him in 1958, where he said that his company employed statisticians and they said bowling would be growing at 12% per year. Whoever the author is, this is a work of art if you consider totally insane projections to be sort of an art form. If you add up all the sports to get the total participation numbers for the 1946 and 1956, you can see that participation rose by 43%. This is all while the US population only rose by 16. Okay, and that right there is the paradigm shift kicking in. Then, however, the estimated 1966 figures assume that trend is going to accelerate. Participation was supposed to grow by 60%, but at that point, there'd be more participation than there would be people, which is, I guess, possible if you've got people playing multiple sports, but come on, some people are playing 0, so for every one of them, you'd need someone playing 3. During the SPAC bubble, LiDAR companies like Velodyne, Oust, AI, Luminar, they all put out rosy projections in their investor presentations, but they were so rosy that they were impossible. They were all counting on getting the same orders from the same few large car companies. Americans weren't addicted to sport so that they spend every excess dollar and every free minute on it. Sometimes they bought new cars and went to a drive-in movie. Also, look at some of the other projections in here having nothing to do with bowling. I don't know, like maybe the person who made it was a huge fan of wrestling, but it didn't really increase that much from 1946 to 1956, and all of a sudden it's exploding by several 100%. Anyways, that was the pitch. The business could keep booming and the stock could keep going up because the pie was going to keep growing, and they were trying. So the most obvious source of new bowlers was women. There were 10 million out of that 26 million who bowled, but why couldn't they get to parity with men? So Bessinger in this interview says, here's the plan. We're putting TV monitors, closed circuit televisions, and playpens basically, so that the moms are going to be able to go bowling, shove their kids in the alleys, daycare basically, and then watch them on TV. If that's your plan, I mean, it's over. And then there's geography, another classic. Bowling alleys in military bases were going to create interest abroad. And to be fair, Russia's leader Khrushchev did ask about meeting bowlers at one point when he came and visited the US. But this is every company talking about how they're about to go to China or India. And of course, there's always increasing participation with existing users, right? They said we're going to get the people who bowl a little bit into leagues, and now they're going to be bowling multiple times per week. Maybe there would be French moms bowling multiple times per week in the coming years, or maybe the stock was in a bubble that seems obvious. And that's not to say that you can't make money in a bubble, right? Famously, George Soros's quote is that when he sees a bubble, he likes to run straight into it and fan the flames. Here's how it all shook out from an article in 1962, just 2 years later. Quote, "This extraordinary expansion meant for most operators, stiffer competition. Essentially, the supply that had come online never found the demand that it needed. And the supply came on super fast because barriers to entry got super low. You could float shares easily by going public to raise the money you needed. According to an AMF executive, quote, "A score or more of bowling operations have gone public in the past few years. The doors were open to a lot of people who shouldn't have come in the business." Are we talking about the dot-com boom or the SPAC boom or railroads in the 1800s? No, but also exactly yes, right? This is a tale as old as time. At first, the failure rate is pretty low for these alley operators, but that's only because Brunswick and AMF are giving everyone who owes them money credit extensions. They're basically Sam Bankman-Fried for that brief period where people were saying that he was basically JP Morgan who was propping up all the banks. So the alleys are surviving at this point, but construction is at a 10-year low. This is bad for the pick and shovel guys, which is what AMF and Brunswick are. In 1962, 1 year, their sales fall 50%. The Brunswick executive stoically says that, quote, "We're in a digestive period." That AMF executive says the whole industry was predicated on running to a capacity house. You could do that only when there was no competition. And when the alleys then try to find helping hand outside of AMF and Brunswick's extensions, the doors that had been open with those easy money IPOs were shut. Quote, "We've rejected a dozen bowling financing transactions in the last year," said one bank executive. In 1965, there were 12,000 bowling centers in the USA, basically the peak. In 2023, there were an estimated 2,700. Trees don't grow to the sky. There's only so many people who will do anything. But on the other hand, there's always someone. If Rip Van Winkle went to sleep for 60 years at the top of the bubble and went to go find a place to bowl again, he might find a Bolero, one of the few de-SPACed companies to perform admirably, that, through a series of acquisitions, is the offspring of both AMF and Brunswick. Thanks for watching, guys.